If we were trying to take an inferential guess here about timelines,
he's well connected at the highest levels of government. He says we got about 2 years.
2 years.
No.
What else does he know that you're willing to share?
He wants to be my neighbor. Get out of the cities, get to an area 600 feet or higher above sea level, and make sure you've got a safe haven 600 feet or more above sea level at a good distance from a major city. That's my advice.
Well, and there are very few areas like that, east of the Mississippi, in the United States.
There are, but do what you can.
After we survive in our concrete structures, then like all the tops will pop off of the missile silos, and all these globalists will flood out. That's their plan, right? They're going to flood back onto the surface and take over after everybody's dead.
They think so.
They think so?
They think so.
Well, they're wrong, because we are the hardcore survivors. If we make it through all that and we're still here, they're going to have a fight on their hands.
Well, a couple of weeks ago, Joe Biden said you need F-15s and tanks to resist the government. Well, tell that to the Viet Cong.
Good point.
The violent earth changes will kick in at some point, and the powers that be, for want of a better term, they're speeding up what they're doing because they want to get their shiny new world order in place before the violent earth changes shut down everything, including them. And what they don't want is hundreds of millions or billions of people roaming around the planet that they don't control. They want those people dead. I don't know how quickly the violent earth changes are going to be coming in. The government knows because they've been tracking the 10th planet since 1979. That's well known within certain segments of the government. It's highly classified. Many retired Navy people, especially, they revealed to me the classified briefings that they attended in the U.S. Navy, Submarine Corps, where they were told that during their lifetimes there would be violent earth changes, including worldwide flooding, an inland sea in the United States where the Mississippi River Valley is now, 200-mile-an-hour winds for probably a day, and possibly a kill shot from the sun in terms of a coronal mass ejection. I don't know the time frame. Here's what the veterans were told in the Navy. They were told, gentlemen, in your lifetimes. That's all they were told.
Can you review, just for those who haven't seen our previous interview, and just kind of summarize the 10th planet, the flyby, the gravitational changes? We're not talking about a collision with Earth. We're talking about gravitational changes. Just give us an overview, please.
That's the 10th planet is what they found. The reason it's difficult to see is because it's got a cloaking covering of dust that's, except in a limited time frame, I think in June, they can see it with normal telescopes, but the rest of the time, the only telescopes that can see it, I have to look in the infrared light spectrum. Regardless, 1979 is when they began in earnest preparing for this thing, because their mathematical calculations told them the size, the speed, the direction of the 10th planet. And it gave them a time frame to begin preparing, which they've been doing now since 1979. Some of it very public with cover stories. There's going to be 2 new capitals. The main one and the one in the west will be Denver. The eastern one and the smaller one will be in Atlanta. Atlanta's the highest altitude major city. Now here's what the Navy veterans were told in the classified briefings. That everything east of the Blue Ridge Parkway, which typically is 80 to 100 miles from the Atlantic Ocean, will be underwater. That everything 600 feet, 300 feet and lower will be underwater. I recommend people get at least 600 feet above sea level. These Navy veterans in these briefings were shown a map. We call it the Navy map. Now, there's about 20 versions of this. Many of them done by psychics and so forth. I worked with 3 different veterans to recreate the Navy map. Now, these guys are working from memory going back to about 1985, by the way, to recreate the map as best they could. It's not meant to be accurate down to the last foot or even the last mile. It's meant to give a general representation of what will be underwater and what will be above water, not an exact foot-by-foot, mile-by-mile representation.
Right, and we're going to show the map as you're talking.
If you overlay a map of where all the FEMA camps are, on top of the Navy map, you'll find maybe 2 FEMA camps that would be underwater out of all the different 25 or 30 or 35, whatever it is, FEMA camps. I thought that was kind of an interesting side note. That the weight of the water of this inland sea will trigger 3 9-point plus earthquakes on a new measured seismic zone, causing great damage north and south and east. Now, in the winter of 1811, 1812, there were hundreds of earthquakes on a new measured seismic zone. 3 of them rang church bells on the East Coast in Philadelphia. Now, that's a lot of power to travel about 1,000 miles to ring church bells. In 1811, 1812, almost nobody lived more than 80 or 100 miles east or west of the Atlantic Ocean. Yeah, there were settlements, there were small cities, but for the most part, not that many back then. And of course, now everything east of Mississippi is heavily populated with really large cities, east, south, northwest, east of the Mississippi River. All those cities are at great risk of these earthquakes, regardless of their elevation. They're at great risk of the earthquakes. I mentioned briefly a moment ago about the 200-mile-an-hour winds. Now, here's what happens there. The jet stream comes down to the surface of the planet. Straight line winds, about 200 miles an hour for about a day. Most human-built structures above ground, won't survive that. The majority of them won't.
That's right. Yeah.
A really strong steel-reinforced concrete might, but very few structures will survive that. A steel-reinforced concrete structure that's round has a much greater chance. Of course, with winds of that velocity, you're going to have things thrown around like school buses. School bus hitting your structure is going to ruin your whole day.
Initiate these changes that are about to tip anyway, or what's the thinking there?
Right. Well, the force of Planet X is gravitational and electromagnetic. It'll be exerting both on our planet, and it's done this multiple times in the past. Even conventional archaeology will show you that about every 3,600 years, 5 or 6 civilizations are wiped out, and 5 or 6 civilizations begin all over again. Seemingly begin all over with fairly high level of technology, engineering, mathematics, and medicine that shouldn't be there for a brand new civilization, but the civilization knowledge is preserved and it starts over. But the preservation of that knowledge is in fairly small pockets of people, maybe in mountainous areas, maybe in the Himalayan mountains. We have records of the Himalayan mountains that go back a long, long way in these various monasteries up there. And so it takes a while to start all over, while most people are either dead or pulling themselves out of the mud and starting all over, barefoot peasants with having lost all the technology that was lost. It takes a long time for that technology to be rebuilt. But technology of a very high, sophisticated level has existed on this planet also, Mike, and that's well known within traditional archaeology also, but it's not talked about very much.
I got the sense that there's a extinction level event coming, that the globalists believe there's an extinction level event coming, and that they are, everything that we're seeing is part of their preparation for that. And that seems congruent with what you're saying, that
building these massive underground cities in the Ural Mountains. Well, now we know, don't we? I didn't know then. High levels of technology have existed on this planet in the ancient past.
the globalists know something big is coming. 10th planet, part of it, they know there's a major Earth shift happening. They know that this civilization, as it exists, is going to be wiped out.
First of all, these people are evil. I don't know if they worship Lucifer, but they may as well. Once the Earth changes become obvious, they won't be able to control these people. Let's go back. Take a step back. People like Elon Musk, they need UPS and FedEx to work like you and I do. The federal government needs UPS and FedEx to work just like you and I do to get deliveries of spare parts and necessary items. They want that to continue till the very end, because there's always a need for more spare parts. I don't care if you're the federal government or who you are, there's always something lacking that needs to be delivered. So they want to keep things normal until the very last moment, on one hand. On the other, once the earth changes really kick in, people are going to go bonkers crazy. And if there's 50 million people going bonkers crazy instead of 350 million people going bonkers crazy, that makes it easier for them to control the people who are left topside.
But those winds, I mean, anybody living in a house built out of 2x4s and drywall, forget it. I mean, that's just gone. That's gone. Your neighborhood's gone. It's like a hurricane swept across the entire planet at that point. What's going to be the first indication that this is happening? Because I don't think, I mean, the globalists aren't going to warn people in advance, obviously.
No, they're not.
When are people going to know? I mean, it's like, oh my gosh, it's here.
What the Navy told the veterans in these classified briefings is, it'll take about 30 days for it to become obvious that the worldwide flooding is kicking into place. That's what they were told. As to the exact scenario, how it's going to play out, I quite frankly don't know how it's going to play out.
What the Cobran does say implicitly, repeating, there is a crossing coming, has been in the past, and we best be ready. The destroyer cometh. And folks, beware of the red dragon. Bet your ass on it, folks. And listen, I don't care what people say. Well, that makes people afraid. Listen, with the snowflakes today, I'm surprised their own shadow doesn't make them afraid. Ain't my problem. Because you know what? When the proverbial, how shall we say, kimchi hits the fan, they're going to be the ones that are going to turn on your ass. They'll be the ones who are going to kill you. They're going to be the ones that are going to take what you got. So, listen, in the human psyche, in our core, is the vibration, the frequency. And when you get into a life and death situation, you'll find when it kicks in. Are you going to fight or flee? It's coming. Fear the destroyer. Yeah, it's bad. Children's hair turned from black to gray overnight. Yeah, it's pretty bad. This is a pretty good, I think, if you want to do what would be a replication of what the Cobran speaks about, this is kind of it. They're apparently in a close crossing. From the description, there are literally, it's fire from the heavens. I don't know if you want to call it an electrical event, a plasma event. Most likely plasma. I think it would be the most logical scientific explanation of what we would be seeing. But they describe it in very, very detail. This gives you an idea of what it could very well look like. Listen, they actually wrote in there that this thing took up literally 3/5 of the sky. I mean, that's pretty, I don't know about you, that kind of gets my attention. So you study about as well, and this is where it begins to have similarities to the Samaritan tablets. It talks about Tiamat and how Earth was formed. That this was the result, that Earth was a result of another planet that was here before called Tiamat. It's in the Samaritan tablets. It's in Stitchen's book, so you can read it in the 12th planet. There have been multiple incursions. It is thought that this is how potentially the moon was formed. There is a lot of things that we are discovering that the ancients knew, and we're quite frankly kind of figuring out, well, how they know this. Throughout history, we have found artifacts that have shown the crossing, that have given the same similar story. Again, going back to the Samaritan tablets, we know that it's clear that this has been the result of coming through before. And Gil Broussard has done some great work. I like, again, you ought to get his work. He'll help explain it to you. And then when you begin to see correlations like this, understanding that they were talking about the Hebrews before the Hebrews were the Hebrews. I'm not quite sure how that happens, but it's happened. So understand the great deluge. Apparently, there's been a couple as a result of a crossing. I found that interesting. But again, the similarities between what you read in the bronze books to the Bible, to the Quran, to the Sumerian tablets, to the ancient teachings of Buddha and before them, even